Better early than never. That's the case as we come to you live here on a Thursday night. Normally, if you're catching us via the podcast later in the week, you would see us on a Sunday night, maybe a Monday night. Sometimes we got to move around a little maneuvering here, but it coincides with the trade deadline. Royals making 5 deals, as it turns out, before the trade deadline. Of course, Aroldis Chapman happened a while ago. We touched on Nicky Lopez and Jose Cuas. They also acquired Tucker Davidson. I guess I'm not counting that one. Maybe that's a 6th one. But Scott Barlow and Ryan Yarbrough are traded for minor leaguers coming back to the Royals. What do they get? What does it all mean? How about the other players that were discussed? Salvador Perez, Brady Singer, Carlos Hernandez. Some reports had the Royals at least discussing those players as options. Are they actually a transactional ball club? They've won 6 straight games. Are they better ball club? I guess we'll go with that. Right now, 6 shutout innings from Ragans, 8 from Singer. Bobby Wood Jr. hitting the ball. Is it all coming together for the Royals? We talk about it right now here on the Kaufman Corner podcast.
You're listening to Kaufman Corner, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kaufman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, and former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kaufman Corner is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here's your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
Yes, indeed. Back out of the trade deadline is come and gone. We break it down right now. The good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, Soren Petro with you. And how about it, Rany? Are you pleased with what the Royals were able to get done at this deadline time?
Well, first off, Soren, I'm canceling my vacation plans for October because we've got some postseason baseball to get ready for.
No, you're not.
All you need to know, if the Royals can just finish 42-10, you and I will still be vindicated. They will win 77 games like you and I predicted. And the crazy thing is, in this division, they might actually win it all. Right, like that's what's so sad. This division is just so pathetic that even mediocrity would be competitive. But yes, their 6-game winning streak has them now on pace to lose only 110 games. So progress, I guess. But we'll get to that in a moment. Let's talk about the trade deadline first. It feels like a classic Royals trade deadline in that they took us up to the last moment, making us think they were going to do absolutely nothing. And then they got in just enough trades right at the wire that they met the bare minimum of what we wanted them to do. They traded Scott Barlow, the obvious move. They traded Ryan Yarbrough, who established himself as probably their number 2 trade candidate right at the deadline. And that was just enough that I can't really complain about the quantity of trades. I wish they had been more aggressive, but it does sound like they at least laid the groundwork for some other ideas. Possibly in the winter. But, given the way the trade deadline started with the Nicky Lopez debacle, I'm glad to see that they at least got what I would consider to be fair value in both of the trades they made. They didn't get any top prospects, but I do like the fact that they traded with A.J. Preller in San Diego because A.J. Preller has never met a reliever he wouldn't overpay for, as we saw with Trevor Rosenthal. And I felt like given what Scott Barlow had done this season, the fact that they got a last year 3rd-round draft pick coming back from Tommy John surgery and Henry Williams. That's exactly the kind of guy I would have targeted, a guy who's high risk but high upside, not because he's a 17-year-old in the Dominican, but because he's coming back from Tommy John surgery and his velocity isn't back yet. But if he gets back to the velocity he showed briefly in college, could actually be one of the Royals' best pitching prospects this time next year.
Now, all right. So let's talk about the transactional side of things. Is this enough to start calling them transactional?
No, it's not. It's like I said, this is kind of par for the course. But I think it's hard to suddenly become transactional when you've got a deadline ticking down on you. Transactional to me, if you're going to make the kind of big trades you and I want them to make, those trades typically get made in the winter when there's time to get things just perfectly right. You don't have yeah, and both teams have uh, time to evaluate all the players thoroughly. When you're talking about coming up to the deadline and you suddenly put a really good player like let's say a Brady Singer on the market, it's kind of hard for another team to know exactly what they're getting with Brady Singer. Are they getting the guy who struggled like hell for the first 6 weeks of the season, or the guy who's looked like pretty much classic Brady Singer for the last 6 to 8 weeks? You got to exchange medicals. They may want to get a physical. Those are hard things to do at the deadline. I think that's the kind of trade you want to see done. You're more likely to see done in the winter. So I think if JJ Piccolo is going to prove he's transactional, he's going to have to make a big move over this winter. What I saw now was just kind of the bare minimum again.
Yeah. But it is the minimum, right? Like it is the minimum.
Yeah. No, I think he met. I'm not upset with the quantity of trades they made at the deadline. Again, aside from the Nicky Lopez thing, I'm not upset with the return they got on any of these guys. I think it's a reasonable return. And obviously, we'll talk more about it later. But I mean, the Aroldis Chapman trade, we're just now getting some preliminary evaluations. That was kind of they didn't go just for the prospect; they went for the close to major league ready guy in Cole Ragans. You don't want to judge that prematurely because that looked like, well, maybe they're sacrificing upside, and suddenly a month later, that's looking like maybe they found something there. So I'm not upset with the trades that they made. But at the same time, I'm not wowed by them. I'm not blown away.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, if we were to break them down and talk about what the pieces are to these trades, Yarborough brings back a 26-year-old right-handed hitting first baseman with a little bit of pop and a 19-year-old shortstop outfielder.
Mm-hmm.
He also is both of them are high on base guys. So there's a little bit of at least a positive there. Devin Mann, the first baseman, Derlin Figueroa, the infielder, outfielder. Scott Barlow brings back Jesus Rios, a right-handed relief pitcher, and Henry Williams. That's the ticket right there, right? The guy that had the Tommy John surgery. I mentioned they get a 27-year-old left-handed reliever and Tucker Davidson. Jose Cuas, Nelson Vasquez, a 24-year-old outfielder. Taylor Hearn comes back for Nicky Lopez. That's its own little debacle. I kind of set that one aside. I'll touch on that in a minute. I think there is a couple of things we want to say about that. And Chapman brought back Ragans, the 25-year-old, and Cabrera, 19-year-old lottery ticket. It's better. In fact, you can't expect a general manager to be all caught up to the best general manager or judge him just on one trade session. I mean, he may have wanted to fire 5 more bullets and they would have been bad had he done it, right? We do know that he was talking about other names by the reports that are out there. That's a step in the right direction. But I will say this. I do like that there's on base. I like that I'm seeing Ragans, and again, we'll talk more about him and Singer in a minute, but I'm like that I'm seeing some progress out of the starting pitchers because there's no point in getting live arms in the past because the Royals would get a live arm and it would get livelier. It would walk more batters, right? Now they seem to be, if we're seeing them start to refine Reagan's stuff, okay, we're you got a reason to believe that they've identified something that they think they can work with, and let's see if they can turn them into cheap quality pitching. So it did enough for me to put me at bay. It did enough to erase the sour taste I have in my mouth for the Lopez trade. I'll say that.
Right.
And I think it's a start, and I think it's a move in the right direction, and I think it's un-Dayton Moore like. I don't think you would have seen anything remotely like this if Dayton Moore had been calling the shots.
Yeah, it's interesting because both Barlow and Yarbrough were not free agents at the end of the year, right? The only guy who fit that category was the obvious move, obviously, was Aroldis Chapman. I mean, shockingly, Jordan Lyles didn't get traded. Zach Greinke could have been moved, but you know what? They actually said that they went to Zach and, presented him that opportunity, and he chose to stay in Kansas City. God love him. And but the fact that they were even willing to move Zach Greinke, that's I don't think Dayton Moore would have done that. And
Can we take a moment just to appreciate, like you said, God love him. I mean, how about it? Zach being like, nah, I'm good.
he's at a point in his career. I mean, he's got 3 young kids, and the fact that think about it, this is the same guy who forced his way out of Kansas City because he wanted to win and did the greatest favor he could have possibly done to the Royals franchise in 2010. And now he is on a team even worse than any of the teams he played. He played for in his early career with the Royals, and he loves it here. Like, I don't know that this is his last go around, but I fear that it probably is. He's still probably, I think, better than his ERA and certainly his record show. But I don't know if he want to stick around. But man, I'd take him for one more year. I just, I'm not. I cannot claim to be rational when it comes to Zach Greinke.
No, I can't.
But with but I will say this: like, they didn't have to trade Barlow. And he had. I do want to emphasize that the big mistake in all of this is that Piccolo did not trade Barlow before the season. I thought he would get about a third of the value, and I think that's about what he got. I mean, Henry Williams is a good player. I think that Henry Williams would have been the second prospect in a deal had he traded Barlow over the winter. Like, they would have gotten a better pitcher or a prospect, and then Henry Williams. So that was a missed opportunity. But given what Barlow was at this point, I think Henry Williams is actually a pretty good return. And again, AJ Preller is willing to pay through the nose sometimes for a prospect or for a pitcher or for ready talent that he wants now. And with Yarbrough, I mean, here's a guy who's under club control for another season and pitching pretty well. Ironically, I think actually having Jordan Lyles under contract for next year almost made it more sensible to trade Yarbrough. Now what's this? They're paying him anyway. At this point, like, they're paying him
that's the point. That having talked to people, that was the point. I mean, I do also think, listen,
was the point also to lose 110 games? Like, no. If I knew they were going to lose 110 games, sure, what the hell? Give them the second year. But
I'm not debating it again. Yeah. They're not a 95 win team without Jordan Lyles. It's just asinine to keep attaching the losses to his name and his name only.
It's not the losses. It's the money. It's the money. I just want to emphasize it's not the losses. It's the money. But look, I'm actually giving them credit. They're turning lemons into lemonade. If having Jordan Lyles under contract for next year made it easier for the Royals to part with Ryan Yarbrough, then okay, we'll put that on his ledger. All right. But the point is, my point is more, it doesn't make any sense to go into next year with two guys, Lyles and Yarbrough, in the rotation when you have Singer. You're hoping Bubic will come back late in the year. You're hoping Daniel Lynch will be there. You now have Cole Ragans. You might want to look at Alec Marsh. Like, if you have all these pitchers you want to give opportunities to, there's only so many spots you want to give to veterans before you start taking away opportunities from guys.
I can't help you with that, because there's the guy. If you mention the names Lynch and Bubic and Singer, or Lynch, Bubic, or Coar, or Bolin, you're wasting time. They are out of.
Well, I didn't mention Coar or Bolin. I'm putting those guys in a complete.
I know the ones you mentioned, but I'm throwing them all in. They're Lynch and Bubic. Let's go. Like, if you get anything from it, great. Found money. I put on an old coat I hadn't worn in 3 years. I found a $50 bill in it. It's awesome. But I'm not planning on that $50 arriving. They're done. I mean, in any organization that is planning around them, they're done. So whether it's veterans or young guys, they are. There's no way you plan a rotation with those guys. That's a fireable offense. I will call for them to be fired. If the rotation lines up with spots saved for them, that's ridiculous. So, yeah, I disagree. At some point, the training wheels have to come off on this team, and they have to be graded. I have no problem with you saying they did the bare minimum. And I will freely admit that my excitement is not about what they got back. It's just that I guess it is about what they got back, in the sense that it's not the kind of things I would have seen Dayton Moore go for. I think there's a lottery ticket with the 19-year-old kid that came in the Aroldis Chapman one. There's power arms that I'm seeing them refine. It's just, there's on-base percentages of premium and not just raw athleticism. This is not I'm happy that they're valuing the things that I think are more important to winning, and the things that have been more consistently part of the equation for other teams that have won. That's what I'm excited about. But it's kid gloves. I mean, they're the only reason this is acceptable is because he hasn't had enough opportunities to go land a big ticket.
Right.
Like, there's still, maybe Ragans is going to be one of those big tickets. Maybe it's going to be like, can you believe this? This former first-round pick, the Rangers screwed him up. Yeah, he was sitting around, and the Royals got him, and they fixed him. It happens. It happens with lefties a lot. Not a lot, but more often than not, but more often than righties. But, they still need a building block. I mean, they still have to show that they can acquire a guy that coming in, everybody knows, oh, this guy's the real deal. And we haven't seen that. So a couple of people mentioned my conversation with Jeff Passan today on my radio show. Jeff comes on every Thursday. Welcome back, Jeff, by the way, after he had fractured vertebrae in his back. He was back with us, and we kind of sparred a lot about, I said, well, when is this team going to be ready? Because like he talked about how, they talked about everything being available. He said, oh, Bobby Witt. They're like, well, not Bobby Witt. And I'm like, yeah, that's the problem, right? Like Bobby Witt still needs to be available. Like maybe he was, and you're just not going to verbalize it because it's going to get out there, and you don't want Bobby Witt hearing that. But everybody needs to be available. That's the key for this team. I mean, I just sitting around and claiming spots though for the Lynches and the Bubiches. So how many years? How many years of team control do you actually think it's a smart move to keep giving to these guys as a spot like that? To me, that's half the problem. This silver spoon that's put in the mouths of these guys that they got a spot. They've done nothing to earn it. Nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to emphasize too much the Lynch and Bubic specifically. I'm saying more just if the Royals are developing all these new pitchers with their new pitching philosophy, and if they can turn Cole Ragans potentially into a rotation piece, you've got to have rotation spots for the guys. My point is simply that it makes sense to trade Ryan Yarbrough given these other factors, but that Dayton Moore may never have done that. The other thing, which it's not something I'm going to credit them for, but a smart, savvy, a dollar savvy team like the Rays would do. Scott Barlow's making $5.3 million this year. Yarbrough's making $3 million. If yes, you have them under club control for next year, but their salaries aren't going down; they're going up in arbitration. So that also, you're not just freeing up a roster spot; you're also freeing up money that you could then go and spend in free agency potentially next year, or save it if you're going to use it in the future for a real difference maker. If you go and waste it on a mid-tier free agent like they've done in the past, and there's no point in that. But there were multiple factors above and beyond the prospects that they got at the deadline that made it make sense to move these guys now. And yet Dayton Moore wouldn't do that sort of thing. He would always wait until the final year. So I will give JJ credit for being more transactional Dayton Moore. That's an incredibly low bar, mind you. But he met the minimum. I'm happy with that. The guys that they got, like I said, we talked about Henry Williams. I like that. The second guy in that trade, Jesus Rios, it reminded me of what we talked about with Nicky Lopez, which is like, couldn't they have just had the Braves throw? Just give us anybody off of your Dominican roster that is not a prospect, just so we can claim we got a prospect. Because I don't know if you've looked at this guy's number, 21-year-old pitcher from Mexico with like barely more strikeouts than walks. Baseball America ranked all 56 prospects that were traded at the trading deadline. Jesus Rios ranked 56th. So, he's an R. He apparently throws 95. Okay, great. We'll see what happens. I'll check back on that guy in like 3 years. But the Devin Mann, Delvin Figueroa, the return for Yarbrough. Devin Mann is, it's one of those guys on first blush, kind of like Cole Ragans, like, well, close to the majors. He's in AAA and hitting well, but there's really not much of a ceiling here. But he's an interesting guy. I mean, he was leading the Pacific Coast League in doubles. He sprays the ball all around the park. High OBP. I think he played more games at second base than anywhere else this season. Played third and first. There's a lot of skills here. I don't know if it adds up to a player. Probably not a starter, but could be an interesting bench piece. Yeah. And there is some upside. Like, there's always like that 5% chance this guy turns into like Justin Turner, one of those like late blooming contact hitters who adjusts their swing and starts hitting for power in the majors and is a better hitter in the major leagues than they ever were in the minors. So he's a little. I like him a little bit more than I would typically like a 26-year-old who's yet to make his major league debut. And then Delvin Figueroa, like you said, he's high OBP. He's only 19. He's still in the rookie ball, though, at least on a state side. He's not in the Dominican. He's in America, so I'll level up from the Dominican League. But he's shown some pop, and he seems to command the strike zone. And they commented on that. They said that we wanted high OBP guys. That's also not a Dayton Moore trade.
No.
So I'm, my ears perked up a little when I saw that. So none of these guys are elite prospects. I think MLB Pipeline put Henry Williams, actually ranked him ninth in the system when they got him, which I think is more testament to how weak the system is right now than his talent. But for Yarbrough and what remains of Scott Barlow at this point in his career, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I am as well, and I do want to underscore. I agree with you. I don't know that Barlow had the ideal time to deal Barlow would have been trade deadline last year, and JJ Picola wasn't in charge then. Dayton Moore was. I agree. I don't mind as much. If Dayton Moore was the guy who said don't trade him last trade deadline, well then I'm frustrated. But if if JJ Picola was the guy saying don't trade him last trade deadline, then I'm a little bit frustrated because. But if JJ got the reins in his first opportunity, he didn't get what he wanted in the offseason. He said, let's play it out. Let's see if we can, build his value and get more for him. It didn't work. It goes down as it didn't work. But I can't put Nicky Lopez on him and all those guys. Like he does, at some point, he has to trade somebody of value. Jeff Passan said that today. We'll see what happens with trades to come. Does somebody have a big year and the Royals trade him? Then we know there's a different philosophy. But you can't have, Hunter Dozier had a big year. He didn't get traded. Nicky Lopez had a big year.
He got an extension.
Yeah. I mean, Dozier got an extension. They're like, oh, we struck gold. This is it. That mindset has to change. And we'll see. We don't have enough time with JJ Picola to see that. How about that they had offers for Salvador Perez. And they seemingly listened to him. And if you listen to the comments of JJ, he talked about having a deal that said, if we get this, we'll do it. I think that was the Brady Singer deal, personally, based upon how he said it, because he went on in that same answer to say years of team control. You don't say that about Salvador Perez, even though you got a couple of years of team control on his contract. That's a term you use before a guy's got to free agency. So they also listened. And there are plenty of reports out there that I think the other teams were talking about that they were listening on Salvador Perez. And I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up with the White Sox. I mean, he loves Grifol. Grifol loves Salvador Perez. They're retooling. I can also see if the Royals missed their window to move him. Maybe there was an interest in him this year and they didn't get it done, and now they'll be looking for somebody else. But I could see Grifol wanting Salvador Perez to lead whatever new look the White Sox are going to put out there. But he seems like a no-brainer fit for the Marlins. And hopefully, that can get done for his sake and the Royals moving forward. But it is nice to hear that they at least discussed some of these names.
Yeah, no, that was the part that more really than you talk about the transactional aspect, more than the trades they made. It's the trades that it's not just that, oh, well, we heard rumors that they were talking. No, that they came out flat out and said, I mentioned Greinke, they talked to Salvador Perez. Like they had to talk to both of those guys, especially Salvador Perez as a 10-5 player. They cannot trade him without his permission. So the fact that they acknowledged that they got to that point, they're acknowledging they are willing to trade their captain, their World Series MVP, their only link to the World Series teams, one of the most popular players in the history of the franchise. That is from your perspective, my perspective, that's reassuring because you know what? There's a section of the fan base that will lose their what if Salvador Perez gets traded. And maybe that's one of the complications of trying to make that move in season. There's the fact that the deadline is there. And then, of course, the issue with Salvador Perez is how much money are the Royals willing to pick up? And this is one where I need to reemphasize this. If they're going to re-explore this in the offseason, John Sherman, look at what Steve Cohen just did in New York. Pick up the money and get the prospect. You're spending that money anyway. Whatever, if you pick up 90% of Salvador Perez's contract, you're saving 10%. Right? If you don't trade him, you're gonna pay more to Salvador Perez than if you trade him, even if you pick up 90%. Steve Cohen basically gave huge contracts to two first ballot Hall of Famers in Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander. And when things didn't turn around, he didn't just trade them. If he had traded them with their $40 million a year contracts, he wouldn't have gotten much. Because that's a lot of money for even Verlander went back to the Astros because the Astros were outbid in free agency, but suddenly, they went from, oh, we can't afford to pay you $40 million a year to, we'll pay you $16 million a year, sure. But they gave up last year's first round pick. They gave up another good prospect. Basically, Steve Cohen bought prospects. Steve Cohen is one of the richest men in America. He can afford to do that. But I mean, John Sherman can play that game as well. I mean, you already have Salvador Perez under contract, so he's getting $20 million, I think, next year and 22 the year after that. Pick up 18 million of the 20 million, because Salvador Perez at 2 million a year is an asset that actually will bring players back, like real players, not just marginal prospects. So I'm glad that they laid the groundwork here. I think if they had traded him at the deadline, I have to assume that was the Marlins, because the White Sox there's no point in them trading for him now when they're having a lost season. But in the winter, you might have both teams as bidders for him. So there is absolutely potential to make a deal work here.
Yeah.
The Brady Singer thing, same thing, but obviously with him, it's more about the talent. If given what he did today, it might be a good thing they held on to him. If he can continue to reestablish his value, you're still going to have 3 years of club control at the end of the year. You can really get transactional at that point, because then he actually can bring back like top 100 prospects. He can bring back some real value.
Yes, and I'd like to see where they go from it, for sure. Jeff Passan talked about how the Mets were maybe going to fire up the Players Association that by buying prospects. He said they're showing how valuable players are. And I'm like, well, so then, if you want that, then get a floor, right? If you have a salary floor, you don't have to worry about that. But you, of course, have to have a salary ceiling and revenue sharing and all those kind of things. But I do think it'll be interesting where that goes. But I think the other thing that needs to be pointed out about what the Mets did was they played the market. There is a fierce race. There is Big Brother, the Astros, who have shown to be a championship caliber club in the state of Texas. And then there's little brother, the Rangers, who have spent a bunch of money and are trying to elbow their way in and be somebody. And they played both sides. They sent one guy to one and then went right back to, listen, dude, your Ranger boys are doing this. I mean, you guys better do this. And they got Verlander sent to the Astros. So I do think that is a great sign of playing the market.
Absolutely.
I'm pretty sure the Mets dialed out at some point. And they knew they had commodities, and they knew where the race was. They knew where somebody would be like, we got to get there. And I think now the Royals didn't have a Scherzer or Verlander. That's the obvious.
Right.
He's not saying, but how far back is Singer right now from where Max Scherzer is? Singer figures like he could still be on the incline or at least plateauing. Scherzer is clearly on the decline. I don't know that you couldn't have gotten as much for Singer, plus cheap team control. That would have been there.
The question is, though, given that the Royals do have him for 3 years, I mean, I'm not saying I'm not sure that they didn't make him, that they weren't actually right to keep him, because I think his value is on the upslope. And I mean, this winter, I don't think it's not like a guy where if he were a free agent in a year and a half, essentially trading him now, the team that gets him can get him for 2 postseasons as opposed to 1. There's he'll lose a lot of value in half a season. I don't think Brady Singer is going to lose a lot of value between now and the winter on the basis of club control. 3 years versus 3.5, not a huge difference. So if he can increase his value in terms of establishing what his talent is, because the more we look at it, the more it looks like Brady Singer's first 6 weeks were a vestige of not pitching at all during the World Baseball Classic, and his stubborn refusal to even consider throwing a changeup. But let me throw a couple of numbers at you about Brady Singer real quick. We'll get to him in more detail later. I didn't realize this prior to today's start. We think of this year as a huge disappointment. Here is his FIP year by year since he was a rookie: 408, 404, last year 358, and then 407. If you look just at what he has control over, strikeouts, walks, home runs, he has been incredibly consistent since he joined the major leagues. And all of his ERA fluctuations have been as a result of balls on play, which he doesn't have much control over. So basically, he has been extremely unlucky this year. And that's for his full season. If you look at what he's done since, I think, the 3rd of May, he's been every bit the pitcher he was last year. So the fact that, if based on what he did today, if he continues to pitch like this for the next 8 weeks, the Royals can go into the offseason, and if they put him on the market, he is going to be – this is not a very strong market for free agent pitchers. He might be one of the 2 or 3 best pitchers available by any means necessary. And, if JJ wants to get transactional, and if he wants to make phone calls out, like you said, he's going to have a lot of bidders for Brady Singer. And he can really – short of trading Bobby Witt, which is the, I am Jerry DiPoto now level of transactionality. If JJ wants to prove he's transactional, Brady Singer is probably the next biggest move he can make, because that could actually bring back top 100 prospects to flesh out this farm system and set the team up for 2026 to 2028 at least.
Yeah, no, and I think that's going to be one of the key things to look at. And I will say this: they better get Carlos Hernandez better get better, and they better get something for him, because this year, if I'm not mistaken, no, he's still earlier than Barlow, so there's still a lot of club control there. But
Carlos Hernandez also got, after this year, I think it's 4 years. So
yeah, so he's
they,
got
I
more.
mean,
But they've got to spin that the right way.
well, he's a reliever. So for him, I don't care if you have 10 years of club control. With any reliever, you got to look. He's got 3 good years. Anything beyond that is luck.
Yes, and that's why they're hanging on to him. If their thought is, okay, we're going to close with them, and we'll pop some saves, and we'll get his value up. If he closes all the way out the rest of this year, and of course he promptly after the deadline came out and gave up 2 runs and an extra.
One of those was the Manfred man. He gave up a home run, but he inherited the guy on second base.
That is true, but it still counts.
Yeah, but I think teams are smart enough to look at that at least. But yes, he has to pitch well between now and the end of the year. Absolutely.
Okay, but I still think the job, if you want to really increase your value, is to be able to strand a guy at second base. I mean, that is a skill, and he couldn't do it. I mean, they promptly came out, and it wasn't good. He was missing 12 inches in, 12 inches out at 97 miles per hour. I mean, I just want to be clear that that's not good enough. And so I'm just putting it on JJ Piccolo that it's fine that you don't deal him, but at the end of the day, he needs to improve his value, and then you need to flip him, unless you're suddenly going to contend next year. And that's the thing that needs to happen. We're proudly brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the Kansas City area, the entire metro area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Parking lot problems disappear when you call the folks at Gann. Been doing it since 1994. Why risk accidents and liability in your parking lot? Get your parking lot restriped today, a brightly striped lot. We'll cut down on accidents, as I said, and keep your parking lot as safe as possible. Nobody needs to have some kind of liability question going on out in the lot. You don't have to if you know the guys at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Call them today at 816-484-3338. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. That's GannAsphalt.com. How about the 6-0 Royals of the last week or so? Where's your excitement about them winning 6 straight?
My excitement, I mean, it would be a lot. It would be a lot more if they weren't still 21 games out with 52 to play. But my excitement is less about the record and simply about the players fueling this. Hasn't been, Matt Beattie and Matt Duffy, leading the charge, right? This is Bobby Witt turning into the player that we all hoped he would be. I mean, what Bobby Witt did on this homestand after he had already been hot all of July is tremendous. I mean, before today, he was up to, I think, 2.6 wins above replacement. Today, he 3 hits, a home run, a stolen base. He's probably going to be at 3 wins above replacement, just like that. I mean, he's on pace to potentially be close to the best season by a Royals position player since Lorenzo Cain finished third in the MVP vote in 2015. Playing great defense, had another great defensive play today. Him and Michael Massey are suddenly like turning double plays like Lou Whitaker and Alan Trammell. So what Bobby Witt is doing is a lot more exciting to me than the 6-0 record. And then, the first and last start in that 6-start stretch was Brady Singer, who in his last 3 starts had a season high 9 strikeouts, then last start season high 10 strikeouts, and then today 8 shutout innings. Didn't only have 4 Ks, but was so efficient. He got 100 pitches, 8 innings. That's what's exciting. Cole Ragans coming out at his second start as a Royal and 6 shutout innings, 8 strikeouts. Like, that's exciting to me. So yeah. I mean, look, there's peaks and valleys. The Oakland A's, who are now, the Royals are leaving them in the rearview mirror, and they're on pace to lose 117 games. The Oakland A's had a 7-game winning streak this year, right? So small sample sizes, anything can happen. It's great that the Royals have finally won 6 after they hadn't won 3 all year. But I'm less worried about the wins and losses and more just about what we're seeing from individual players. And I mean, the Bobby Witt thing is what really is making me happy, because he's doing it all. I still want him to take a few more pitches. I'd still like to see him draw a few more walks. That's the one thing that's kind of holding him back. But everything else is coming together very nicely. He just turned 23. He's on pace to be the best position player the Royals have developed since probably Carlos Beltran.
With a 108 OPS.
108 OPS from a shortstop with elite speed and, apparently good defense now. Yeah, I think so. I'd like to see more. I mean, that 108 today might go up. It might probably went up 3 or 4 points. He's, got to continue this trend. He's not there yet, but I'm just saying, at least, the 1,500 plate appearance rule may not apply to him. It may have just taken about 700 plate appearances for Bobby Witt. The other thing I'll say about Bobby Witt,
he's at 1,100 right now.
So 1,000. It took about 1,000 for him to get there. He's at 1,100 already. Jeez. Well, that actually ties into the point I was about to make, which is we have an expression in medical field, and I imagine other fields have it, that the most important ability is availability.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a baseball phrase.
Yeah, I'm sure that is too. Well, I think
it's definitely a football.
We've been around longer than they have. All right, Soren. So they stole it from us.
Well, based upon when I go to your waiting rooms, you're not very available.
Well, come to my office. We try to be efficient. So, but Bobby Witt, to his credit, when you think about how many players, I mean, he's replacing Adalberto Mondesi. So, we're seeing the extremes here. But Bobby Witt played in all but 12 games last year. I actually looked up. He missed 5 games in a row in late July. I don't even remember why. That was the only time all season he missed more than 2 games in a row. This year he's missed 2 games all season, both scheduled days off. You can't get better if you're not on the field, and he's on the field. He's durable at a position which, as Adalberto Mondesi has shown us, you can take a lot of nicks and bruises. It's also the position that Cal Ripken played for 16 consecutive seasons without missing a day. So you can play every day, but he's doing that. And it's not wearing him down. He is getting better as the season goes along. So that's exciting to see that he's, not just an incredibly able player, he's a durable, available player. And so I'm actually, it took a little longer than I would have liked. And early in the season, he was struggling, but I'm really happy with what we're seeing from him now.
Well, and Michael Garcia's, we're nothing to complain about with Michael Garcia. But now the question I think starts to become is, how do you look at this team? Where's there more value? Michael Garcia playing third base, or the value that people will perceive him to have because he now looks like he can be an everyday shortstop? And that to me would be, they're not going to move Witt, but if they did, because they got some monster package and they move Garcia to short, or if they go, nope, Witt's the franchise guy and we're going to move Garcia, I will really buy in that they're transactional, that they're big picture, that it's about winning and not, trying to sell a couple of jerseys at the stands.
That's an excellent point. Yes, when we talk about the transactional, Witt's the nuclear option, which you and I both want to launch a nuke, and Singer is like the next best thing, but Maikel Garcia is absolutely, in that conversation because he's establishing himself as an everyday major league player who can contribute offensively in his potentially elite defensively. He's at third base. He has more value as a everyday shortstop and if that's to another team, then that's to another team. So, and I think, for the rest of the season, absolutely, Rush should play him every day at third base, prove to everybody this guy's an everyday player in the major leagues. He's 23 years old. At this point, he reminds me of all the shortstops that the Indians seem to come up with out of an assembly line over the years, from Asdrubal Cabrera to they had, what was it, Johnny Peralta years ago. The now Guardians have had a history of bringing up these really young infielders who come up and they're not like elite hitters, but they're so young that after a year or two, I mean, Jose Ramirez kind of falls into that category. Jose Ramirez wasn't a great hitter when he came up. And you think about, the guys they traded Francisco Lindor for. Andres Jimenez was a nobody when they got him, and last year was worth 7 wins. Maikel Garcia feels like that kind of player to me, and they could sell him to another team. He's not hitting for power yet, but he's so young. He's proven he can hit and field at the major league level. There's a team out there that will look at that guy and say that guy could be an above average shortstop in the major leagues next year. And if they're willing to pay for that, he's got more value in trade. So yes, Maikel Garcia and the Royals. I mean, Caden Wallace might be their best prospect, and he's a third baseman. All right, it's it's a low bar, but point is that they've drafted a guy that they think might be a third baseman for them in a few years. Maikel Garcia was not supposed to be the solution at third base this year. Like they kind of fell into that. So I think that putting him on the market and seeing if they can move him for more value than they have with him is absolutely a smart move this offseason.
Yeah, no, and I think it'll be interesting to see if that does come about, and how much if we hear at that time that, well, we really got the groundwork laid with some conversations that happened at the deadline, because that does happen some of the time. By the way, Caden Wallace 266, 346, 443 in high A ball at age 21, not rocketing through the system.
No, but he's one of the few guys in the system who hasn't fallen flat on his face this year.
Yeah.
I said it was a low bar. Like this is the thing we'll talk about with Ragans and Singer now probably, but like I've said this before, the pitching development this year has been actually a bright spot relative. That is not the reason why the Royals are still on pace to lose 110 games is not because Brian Sweeney and Zach Bove haven't done some work. The pitching is starting. We're starting to see some evidence of results here. And yeah, it takes time to turn a battleship around. The problem has been the hitting development has just gone to crap. And to the point where Caden Wallace is a relative bright spot in the farm system simply by being okay.
I'm not quite as optimistic about the pitching, although I will say Brady Singer is the important one. And I gave them an edict, fix him with a month to go, fix him or trade him. They listened to trades, but they appear to have fixed him. So I'm okay with what they've gotten done there. I would like to see Carlos Hernandez be lights out down the stretch, and I'll start to buy that, they're able to work some magic and make it happen. But the Ragans part that's the exciting part for me.
Right. Well, the
Singer's supposed to be good, for God's sake.
But the common thread there is that there's like a documented reason in both cases. In both cases, it's about either using a third pitch more or actually inventing a pitch. Like Andy Rogers has been doing some real work for the Royals website and covering this. And like before after his last start, Singer's last start, she had some great quotes in here about the Royals pushing him to use his changeup more. I think he threw 11 changeups in his last start. Not a ton, but like close, over the 10% threshold, which we've talked about this. His first 2 years in the major leagues, he threw the changeup like 3.5% and 4% of the time. Last year was, I think, 7.7, not even 10%, but that was enough. That was enough for him to be successful. Early this year, it was back down around 4 or 5%. They've been pushing him to throw it more. We got quotes here. It should be a huge growth moment for him to understand he needs it. Matt Cortera said, I know he's constantly working on the changeup. Brian and those guys are constantly talking about it, fiddling with grips and different keys that will help him mechanically. So after today's start, there are more quotes. He threw 9 changeups today out of 100 pitches. 9%, not a huge amount, but if he can just stay around 8%, it seems to be working for him, because it just, you put the fear of that pitch into the mind of a hitter, even though it's not a great pitch. If you have to be set up for it, it makes his fastball and slider that much better.
I'd like to see more than 9%.
I would, but even 9%. Point is, he wouldn't even throw. The problem was early in the season, he was throwing at 4% of the time, and it's like, dude, throw it more. But the Royals, to their credit, at least are emphasizing this. So we have quotes here. Brian Sweeney today talking. This is actually interesting. A new grip has helped Singer gain comfort, while Sweeney hasn't stopped pushing the changeup conversation with his young ace. Quote, how is this going to help you build outs? How can we use this changeup today to help make your slider better, to help make your fastball play? He wants to throw a good changeup. He's just got to learn to trust it. So what's interesting is 5 days ago, the quote about they're fiddling with grips. Today, there's a quote about they found a grip that they like. So that is part of it too. Finding a grip. It sounds so like simple and basic, but how many times have you heard about a pitcher who just a grip clicked and suddenly he's throwing a new pitch and has changed his career? It happens all the time. And we'll get to it in a moment. But Cole Ragans, same thing. But with him, it was developing a slider instead of a changeup. And that's made a huge difference just in the span of the 4 weeks he's been in the organization.
Yeah. By the way, Randy's just excited about pitching coaching. He doesn't Eldred talking about it. How about that? Look at that getting in there. Terry says long overdue. And I do agree from the organization, but let's keep in mind that this major league pitching staff, pitching coaching staff this is their first year. So this is their first chance to work with him. And if everybody comes up and by, late July and August, they're all starting to get it, we're going to be like, these guys are miracle workers. Right. So let's keep in mind, they don't bear the responsibilities of failures from years past. That's an important part of the equation. And I'm with you. Does Ragans, you want to jump in and be like, oh, we've got the new Cliff Lee. Like he's going to battle for Cy Youngs.
No.
If Ragans can just be a 5-6 inning guy and be effective, then that to me gets you good prospects in a trade down the road. Right. I know we've got a lot of time left in the season to discuss what the approach should be. But these guys don't have to be superstars. They can just start to make an impact if they can be quality, because then you can trade them for the prospects that can be superstars.
Yeah. I mean, if you believe, which I unfortunately do, that this team is at least 3 years away from really being a contender, anybody on the roster right now is somebody who might actually have more value in bringing in future players than the value they actually bring by being on your team for the next 3 years. Because by the time you're ready to contend, they're going to be close to free agency. Ragans is sort of on the border. Let me see. He's actually still under 1 year of service time. So he's certainly not a guy you have to make that decision with soon, as opposed to somebody like Singer.
But think if you just pitched him, if he consistently went out, gave you 6 innings, was giving you 170, 175 innings for the next 2 years with a 4 ERA and a good strikeout ratio, then come a trade deadline in his third year, you get massive return for that guy. That guy's
sure. That guy would be massive return. And my hope is at that point, by the third year, that maybe you're in a position where you're competitive if you don't have to. But yes, you have that choice at any time. I think I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. Our 175 innings of a 4 ERA would be a huge success for 20 innings of a Aroldis Chapman or whatever. But the thing with Ragans is, is interesting. The first thing we talked about was that, his velocity was up. His first start, he came up 2 weeks ago and threw harder than he had all season long. Yesterday, he didn't quite throw that hard, but his average velocity was right around 95, which is pretty much where it was with the Rangers earlier in the season, except with the Rangers, he was pitching out of the bullpen, right? He made 17 appearances all out of the bullpen. I think only 3 times all year had he thrown even 30 pitches. He threw 94 pitches yesterday, and his velocity was less than half a mile an hour lower than his season velocity, and 2.5 miles an hour faster than last year when he was a starter. So that extra velocity is the first step. But the problem that he's had all season and really throughout his career is his cutter. He throws a cutter, kind of sucks.
Yeah.
He knows it kind of sucks. And when he was in Omaha after the trade, he actually, I think in his first start with Omaha, he gave up 8 hits, 6 of them came on that cutter. The Royals went to him and said, what can we do differently? What do you think we could do differently? And he said, I'd like to throw a slider. And they're like, yeah, we agree. You need to throw a slider. They worked on it. He started throwing a slider, new pitch. In fact, it's still not listed as one of the pitches he throws in the majors because I think they're still the algorithm that MLB uses for StatCast still had it classified as a cutter yesterday, but it was a slider, and he threw a really good slider yesterday, and it changed to his entire performance outlook, and he struck out 8 guys. I think 38% of pitches were called strikes or whiffs, which is an elite percentage. The CSW percentage, anything above 30% is good. He was at 38% yesterday. So there is legitimate reason to think this is a better pitcher. Cole Ragans is a better pitcher today than he was when the Royals acquired him. And that's what we've been asking for for the last 5 years. And the Royals actually have people in place, both at the major league level, but also, this was Dane Johnson, the AAA pitching coach who was working with him. Like you just said, for 4 months, of being in the organization, guys like Sweeney and Bo, we're starting to see some results. Yeah, maybe we were a little aggressive in hoping that in April and May that we would see some improvement with the pitching staff, and certainly in May they sucked. But there's really been some development here in June and especially in July. They're throwing strikes more often. Their called strike percentage is improved. Their walk rate has dropped. So there is some evidence that the changes they've made have borne fruit. I hope JJ Piccolo recognizes that and says, well, I brought in these guys and they helped the pitching. Maybe it's time to bring in some new guys to help with the hitting. Maybe it's time to bring in some new guys to help with the scouting and drafting. Like, you need a lot of new guys, but he's gotten some positive feedback. There's behavioral psychology says the positive feedback will encourage you to do it again.
I will say this: the week started as a turd, right? The Nicky Lopez. There's no way when you put all the elements into it, did they fall asleep on the waiver wire? Did they, whatever that was?
It was embarrassing.
It started rough. It ended a lot better. A 6-game win streak, progress out of the starting pitching, more transactional. It ended up being a much more positive week. I will say that. Anything you want to wrap with?
Very briefly, I got a minor league minute for you because it wraps into all of this. A guy I haven't mentioned much at all since the Royals acquired him, Chander Champlin. You may recall the name. And the reason I bring him up is he was the third guy in the Andrew Benintendi trade last year. And the first two guys, TJ Sikema and Beck Way, kind of sucked this year. I don't know if you noticed. Beck Way had a ERA of 10 as a starting pitcher in Double-A this year. He's moved to the bullpen, and his ERA is down to like 8.5. Okay, yippee. But Chander Champlin, who started the year in A-ball, was excellent in Quad Cities with a 2.74 ERA. Got promoted to Double-A. He's thrown 7 starts there now. He's got a 3.16 ERA for the season. 99 innings, 78 hits, a strikeout to walk ratio better than 3-1, and ERA under 3. He's in Double-A, pitching well. And I think it's important to bring him up, because he was the third guy in the deal. And you know what? Prospects are volatile. Sometimes the lottery ticket you hit on. And he was the only guy who was at low A ball. The other two guys were at high A ball, closer to the majors, quote unquote, more polished, but maybe less of a ceiling. This is the guy who, is actually, you get 3 pitchers. If one of them turns into a good major leaguer, it was a good trade. Yeah. But also, another sign that maybe the Royals are doing some things at the minor league level now with their pitching development that they weren't doing before. Last year, after the trade, he came over from the Yankees and was terrible. In 32 innings, he had 58 hits and an ERA of almost 10. This year, with a new philosophy at the minor league level, pitching quite a bit better, probably looks like he'll be a major leaguer in some capacity. So I thought it was a nice to bring him up because it fits the themes of today's episode of pitching development and acquiring guys at the trade deadline. So somebody to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, Rany, you're off on vacation. So we're doing tonight instead of Sunday. We figured we're going to end up talking about the trades mostly a lot as well. If there's something emergency, we'll pop on Sunday. I'll pop on Sunday. We'll see what we have. But otherwise, we'll be back at it a week from Sunday. If you're catching us via the podcast, that's when we usually do actually Monday. We'll be on Monday.
Yes, we'll be on. Yep.
So if there is anything, we will be back though. If something big comes about, we'll get on. I'll get on. We'll get a guest. We'll make it happen. We'll be there for you here on the Kaufman Corner, just as we were there for you tonight. Don't forget, we're proudly brought to you by Gan Asphalt and Concrete. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project, you get a written warranty with that project. Gan Asphalt keeps parking lot problems from appearing in your business. Keep your parking lot safer and avoid your business having unnecessary delays and costly expenses. A safe parking lot is good for your customers and your clients, and Gan Asphalt and Concrete can deliver that for you. They're Kansas City's best. Find them online right now at ganasphalt.com. So for the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on Kaufman Corner.